I finished That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. I sat down and I watched like a season and a half in the past week. Now granted, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is not over. It has finished at season 3, but back in September of last year they did announce the confirmation of season 4. Because there's a lot of plot that's still left to tell. But dude, I love this show. I feel like I should feel shame in saying that, but I don't, because I genuinely just enjoy this show.
Sure.
It is, so I was thinking about this last night when I was trying to go to bed. If Game of Thrones is a T-bone steak with butter and a plate of vegetables and a baked potato and like a Michelin star rest perfectly crafted, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is Chick-fil-A. It's really, really good, but it is just junk food. That is what it is.
Yeah,
it is like,
it's
yeah,
good.
it's still something that's really, really good, but it's you understand that it's not the peak echelon of, like, you're not eating A5 Wagyu steak, you're eating Chick-fil-A, but you still love that Chick-fil-A. And I know that's a really weird analogy to make, but it really is, because this story is just so, like, I don't want to say even masterfully crafted, because one of the reasons why I equate it to something like fast food is because ultimately there is struggle in the story, but everything just kind of ends up working out in the end. It's not like, it's not something that's super complex and you're thinking about all of it, and like there's so many different things going. Like, there is an element to that, and I'm curious to see where they go, because that plot thread that they've left is getting into, like, it has been the plot line that is followed for the past like 2 seasons, I'd say, and is gonna, I'm assuming, be the main crux of season 4. Now, I don't know if that's true with the manga, but my assumption with how they end season 3 very deliberately, like setting up this being the plot line, which I'll just go ahead and spoil it for you, because spoiling That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, I don't think takes away from the enjoyment of it whatsoever. It is a show I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in if you ever do get around to watching it one day. But even if you do, it'll probably be so long from now that you'll forget what I'm about to say. But essentially, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, as I've said, is the story of a human being who died and got reincarnated as a slime in a fantasy world. It's about him, but it's about him wanting to build an empire between monsters and humans. A huge thing is he wants synergy, and it's obviously an allegory for racism. Like, that's, they do not hide that whatsoever. But essentially where this season ends is setting up essentially a cabal of like these elders who don't want this to happen. Like, it's very plain and simple. Like, you're not going to be brain explode with the complexities of the show, but it is this group of old people who don't want this to happen. They don't want monsters and humans to sync, but it's being led by, and this is where I'm really curious to see where this goes. These old men are kind of being manipulated and used by this little girl, who, it's kind of hinted at, never explicitly said, but she also was reincarnated into this world, is kind of my assumption. It's heavily hinted at. And her whole thing is she's greedy. It's not that she necessarily hates the fact that monsters and humans get along. She ultimately doesn't really care. It's more like she just wants everything. She wants greed. Like, this new, like, the Jura Tempest forest, which is the land that Rimuru rules over, the main character, and lives in. These elder cabal people, and specifically this little girl, don't want Rimuru to take over this area. They want that for themselves. It's a little less about them being like we have those storylines though. One of the storylines is there's this church. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But it's essentially the Holy Church. I think it's literally actually called the Holy Church. And they view monsters as an affront to God. They view it as like, our God hates monsters, and therefore we hate monsters. And you would think that it would end with a whole anti-religious message and things like that. It's actually done really interestingly, in a way that I actually really enjoy because it doesn't skew an anti-religious viewpoint, in my opinion. It actually is one of the problems that I have with just religion in general is people who take the readings and the texts and the teachings and spin it for their own gain.
Yeah.
And in the
Yeah.
story that this tells is these they're called the 7 days clergy. They're these
Oh,
7 really old men. They're completely faceless. You never get to know who they are because it doesn't matter, because they're actually just a manifestation of people who are taking religion and using it for their own personal gains and to further their own agenda. It's
sure.
never a religion's bad. It's a this is what can happen if you take what is taught in a religion and spin it for yourself and become greedy and try to get personal gain out of it. Which again, it's a level of complexity that I didn't really expect from this show to delve into. Again, I knew like the racism part, but you're also tackling like people spiraling with religion and what a god actually is. And it's again, it's so many different plot lines.
Yeah.
One of the big things from this like that plot line, the 7 days clergy, was the kind of magnum opus of season 2. It was building up these this is where everything kind of works out, and it fits a little bit more into that junk food category
Mm,
because everything works out really easily. Rimuru is just made out to be like essentially a genius. Like he's able to figure things out really quickly. There's not really much of a struggle, but it is interesting to see how they balance them not necessarily struggling with still telling these complex stories, because at the end of the day, they figure out really easily that it's the 7 days clergy that are manipulating them, and they defeat
sure.
them really easily. The whole
Sure.
point isn't necessarily building up this whole big, like, there's obviously a big fight, but you want to know how the 7 days clergy is defeated? It's not in this grandiose fight. It's actually with the person that they've been worshiping as a god coming in and just killing them because they misunderstood their beliefs. Like that's how it ends. There's no giant fight with the 7 days clergy. Like it's literally they are defeated so easily because the whole point, in my opinion, wasn't the story of the 7 days clergy building to this big fight. It's the story of them misrepresenting their god and their god getting angry at them and killing them with no remorse because they mistook what they believe to be true.
Mm,
And also it ends with their god, who we find out is a demon lord. Now I will say demon lord can be kind of misconstrued. I feel like they're using it as just a title. Demon lord doesn't necessarily mean demon in terms of hell. Now granted, you do have to do some kind of bad things to get there, but it just kind of means all powerful being. Is kind of the way it's portrayed.
okay. Yeah.
And that's why it gets a little bit complex in the sense of, oh, they're a demon lord, they must be a terrible person. No, most of the demon lords are actually super gracious leaders of their people. They're just super super powerful and did unfortunately have to do some pretty bad things to get that
Mm,
power. Rimuru has to kill 10,000, or I think it was 20,000 people to get that. Like 20,000 human beings have to die for Rimuru to become a demon lord, and it is done. And this is going back to, I can't remember if this was, I think this was the end of season 1, if not the very beginning of season 2. It is done in, oh my, I love this scene so much. So the way it's done is Rimuru has this mask and they're in their human form. They
yeah.
have this mask that's supposed to hide their aura, their magic, because you typically exude a lot of magic, and Rimuru is extraordinarily powerful, so they're exuding a lot of magic. So they put this mask on to kind of
Okay.
hide their presence. And their country, the Jura Tempest Federation, is about to get attacked by the humans who have been misled by the 7 days clergy. And Rimuru is he one of the biggest things that Rimuru's had is we don't harm humans. We want to live faithfully with humans. And you see kind of a change in his character because he's realized that so the reason he wants to become a demon lord is because these humans attacked while he was away and killed a bunch, like slaughtered a bunch of his friends, and
Okay.
he cannot cope with that. He actually can't cope with the fact that his friends died, so he is willing to do anything in his power to bring his friends back. I actually cried. It was a very beautiful scene where you see him snap. You see he's standing over the dead bodies of his friends. And this show is a little bit gory. It's not just like, oh, no, it's like they have their guts split. Like it's a little bit like, yeah.
Sure.
And Rimuru is standing over the dead body of specifically his secretary. And he's like, I can't cope with this. I will do absolutely anything. And this character comes in and tells him the story of the only way that you can resurrect people is there's this fairy tale from hundreds of years ago of someone who became a demon lord and used their powers as a demon lord to bring back their friends. And Rimuru is like, I will do absolutely anything. So Rimuru goes from this character who's like, absolutely never harm humans. We're like, I used to be one. Like, we never want to cause harm. We want to this person who is a little bit more complex as a character in the sense of understanding there are bad humans out there and we're going to have to do something about that sometimes because me saying don't kill humans led to my friends dying because they believe in me so much that they were willing to die to not harm humans. And Rimuru feels so much guilt and responsibility for putting his friends in that position, and the people who believe in him, they literally call him Lord Rimuru. Like, he is their savior. And he let them down in his own eyes. So back to the original scene, he puts on this mask and he slaughters 20,000 people, or so specifically, he slaughters 10,000 people without hesitation. He uses light and actually concentrates light down and just skewers them all. Like, it is a brutal scene, and it is done in such a masterful way of Rimuru has this mask and you can see that he is devoid of anything because all he cares about is becoming a demon lord, and he's just slaughtering all these people. And then that's the first 10,000. The second 10,000, while he kills those first 10,000, he gains a new ability. And I can't remember what the new ability is called, but essentially what happens is anyone who loses the will to fight against him dies immediately. So he kills these 10,000 people, gets this new ability, and it's like, activate the ability. He, like, most monotone, like, activate the ability. And then the other 10,000 soldiers who just watched their, these 10,000 people die, they all just drop dead. Their souls get lifted, they just drop dead. All that's left is the king who started this, his right-hand man, and a mage. And it is such a, again, like, phenomenal scene in the sense of you're watching Rimuru go from, you're watching his evolution from a happy-go-lucky slime who just wants to live happily with everyone to a character who understands there are some actions that need to be taken that just, they're terrible actions, but it's what has to be done if I want my loved ones to live. There are people who are unfortunately never going to accept us, and I can't negotiate with these people. I have to kill them. I have to do what's necessary. Now, he becomes a demon lord, he revives all his friends, and then we go back to a little bit more happy-go-lucky. But that's like the story of season 2. And then season 3 is, now that he's become a demon lord, he wants to essentially present himself to the world as a demon. He wants to make the grandiose announcement to the world that I am a demon lord, because that means that people are less likely to mess with him. People are scared of the demon lords. Like, there's only 8 of them, and people are terrified of them. Because again, the title of demon lord is scary. They know what it takes to become that demon lord. Him killing those 20,000 people to get to, they know he is terrifying. And so how do they do that? They do it in the form of a festival. And it's, you get a really fun balance in this 3rd season of that happy-go-lucky, like, oh, we're throwing a festival, everything's working out, we're going to build a coliseum, we're going to have battles, we're going to have all these things. But you also have people who don't want this to work out. You have people who don't want this festival to succeed, and that's the conflict. Now, I heard before I even watched that time I got reincarnated as a slime that people didn't like season 3 because there wasn't as much battle. To them, I say, you have not watched seasons 1 and 2, because the entire point of this show is very clearly, and I think maybe you can even tell having not watched it, the point of the story is not the action. It's not the battles. The point of the story is the politics. It is the sitting down and negotiating with these foreign superpowers. And we literally have 2 whole episodes in this 3rd season where Rimuru is just meeting the leaders of the people who are under his domain. because obviously he rules over this entire giant forest, and he's now declaring himself the leader and the ruler as a demon lord over all of these. So there's a bunch of sub factions within that forest, and they're all presenting themselves to Rimuru. And this is where it's a really important time, because he needs to not fuck this up. He needs to show, I am a caring leader, but I'm also a leader who doesn't fuck around. Like if you do something bad, like I'm a demon lord, and I am no longer afraid to take the actions that are necessary. And that character evolution, again, is super, super interesting. And again, you still have your happy-go-lucky, like, joyful things. You have that junk food, but you also have that heart and that, like, care that was put into crafting a story about a slime who got reincarnated into another world. That, again, I think is just, I would say I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed this. I'll be totally honest. I did not expect to enjoy this story as much as I did. But I have. But enough about that time I got reincarnated as a slime. I will talk about it again when season 4 releases, but unfortunately my last time talking about it anytime soon, because I have finished it. Unless there is a movie. I might watch the movie this week, and then I can talk about that time I got reincarnated as a slime movie. But we'll see. Because it's technically not canon to the anime. It's just kind of a fun thing. And I don't watch all of those. Like, I haven't even watched all the One Piece movies, because the One Piece movies aren't canon. So I typically, I like to stay with canon stuff when it comes to movies. I have seen some of the One Piece movies, and I do plan on watching all the One Piece movies. But again, with anime, it's like a little bit more difficult just because of a time thing. I want to watch so many things that watching something that is never going to come back is